Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matthew Lee, and it has been my honor to serve on the Grassroots Board of Directors for the past several years. You know, when I heard that Weston Hicks was coming, I thought, that's my cousin. Oh, yeah, there's some stories that can go there, but due to the lack of time, I'll stick to the script. Daniel Greer and Weston Hicks are two young, edgy, conservative commentators from Austin who call out big government for not only the Democratic Party, but for the Republicans as well. Greer and Hicks will make the case that the last 6 years, they have made it harder for the quietly pro-Democrat and pro-liberal forces in and around the moderate GOP political class, or rhinos, to hide. They will talk about how the conservative grassroots movement in Texas has achieved success and how it must maintain its boldness and courage in changing the conservative landscape. Joanne will also be on hand to give an update to the new website and media plan being constructed by the Texas Conservative Grassroots Coalition, of which Grassroots America, We the People, is a member of. This is a new platform designed to get constitutional conservative voices of Austin, of We the People, heard in Austin. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce Daniel Greer and Weston Hicks.
Can you hear me?
No. Okay.
Well, it's great to be here, and just Joanne, even a group this size is a good group for a state political. I mean, we have to remember that state politics is pretty niche. I mean, not most people don't keep up with state politics. So to have a group that's not only staying up with state politics, but meeting regularly and has an idea about some legislation every session and some candidates and different. I mean, it's really great. And I'm of the firm belief that it's really not the numbers anyway that matters. It's who you reach. I mean, there's opinion makers that everybody has the person in their family that they go to that they trust to have a read on something. And that person goes to somebody else who they trust to have a read. I really believe that most of that stuff is done organically, and we're at a point where we don't believe what we see on TV anymore anyway. So those big numbers, I don't know what they count for in terms of moving the needle anymore. But we're going to start off today. This will be a little different than normal speakers. There's not a whole lot normal about Daniel and I. So we're going to do it. We're going to just do it. It's going to be both of us talking. It'll be different than what you're used to, but I think you're going to like it. And I think we're going to leave the meeting having been encouraged by one another. My name is Weston Hicks. Yes, Matthew is my second cousin. I believe we determined that finally. Our grandfathers were brothers. I used to come out here. I grew up in El Paso, and I used to come out here. My grandfather, who was from this area, moved out to El Paso during the Korean War and was at Fort Bliss during that time. Started a business there, construction business. And after my mom graduated high school, moved back to Grand Saline. And I grew up going to Grand Saline 2 or 3 times a year, and it was my favorite place on God's earth. And I remember my dad was just finishing law school, and he sat the 3 of us down. At the time, there was only 3 of us. He sat the 3 of us down, and his family was in El Paso, and asked us, okay, pretending we had a vote, we can move anywhere in the world. And I think they thought we were all going to say El Paso. Move anywhere in the world. What's it going to be? And my older brother, El Paso. My older sister, El Paso. And then I was Grand Saline, because I love East Texas, and I still do. I am married. I went to University of Texas at El Paso and got a bachelor's. I went to UT Law School and got a law degree, though I never intended to be a lawyer. I got a job in politics about 7 years ago, between 6 and 7 years ago. State politics, was in the right place at the right time, and met him and met Michael Sullivan, and have been doing it ever since, and I love it. I'm married. I have 6 kids. and so they keep me pretty busy. That's who I am.
Hi, I'm Daniel Greer. Though we came up from Austin area, we're not in Austin. He's in Pflugerville, and I'm in Elgin, which is just east of town. And that's about where I grew up. I grew up in Taylor, which is about 30 miles away from Austin, and I've only made it about 15 miles in 30 years. So, and since 1845, my family's only gotten from Waco to Elgin. So I'm a 7th generation Texan. Been around for a long time. I grew up in Taylor, moved to Austin area, Cedar Park, when I went to high school there, met my wife, went to the University of Texas and graduated in '07. And in '06, the year I got married, I was approached by Michael Sullivan, and he asked me if I would help him start Empower Texans. And so I cut my teeth with him for 3 years at Empower Texans, and then Weston came on board, and he and I started working on a little site called AgendaWise. And AgendaWise we'll talk a little bit more about it in a second, but basically it was the vision of bringing the culture war, the culture from outside of Austin into Austin, which is it's like bringing it's bringing antibiotics into a virus, and you should see the way that they react to it. It's powerful stuff. We'll talk more about that in a second. But we did that for about 6 years, and now we're on to going around talking about the place where we are now.
I also, by the way, on my dad's side, up in Morris County, we've been in there, and we're still in there for generations and generations. They always take me to a graveyard and they tell me ever since I was little, you're related to everybody buried here. And the first people buried there were like 1840, so they're still all back in there. We go visit them from time to time. But Daniel's exactly right. At AgendaWise, we had a hard time talking about AgendaWise for a long time because we knew what we were doing. We knew that it was impactful, but it was not like anything else that was going on. And we finally figured out how to talk about it. And that's exactly what it is. It's still kind of the core of our hearts. We've moved on from AgendaWise, but fighting the political culture war. Just like there's a culture war in any town you go to, and you see kind of modern culture and liberal culture breaking in, and you see the conservative culture kind of fighting it off. You see that. We all see that happening in political towns, in politics. The exact same thing is happening. There will be a culture of the political conversation. And the way I've come to firmly believe that politics is not controlled by this issue or that issue. It's much, much more controlled by who controls the culture, who controls the rules by which we choose our words and choose our clothes, and what issues are you allowed to talk about. And political correctness is nothing more than the rules that keep the people in power in power. If they can keep you within those bounds, then they can control it. Whatever comes at them. You can come at me with, I want to do, here's my agenda of 5 things, and as long as you as long as you're politically correct about how you go about it, as long as you follow their rules and adopt their culture, they're really not worried about you, because their culture is designed, and political correctness is a part of that, is designed to keep us from being a threat. And so from the very beginning, and I believe the reason the Tea Party was worried them so much, worried the political class so much when it first kind of started in 2009, 2010, is that all of a sudden Tyler and White House and all the little towns of Texas were in Austin. The culture of these little towns, the culture of your living room and of your family reunions and of your dining table was all of a sudden in Austin. And like he said, it's like, they've got to be able to control it. They want everyone to dress like a banker, first of all, and it's an interesting thing to think about. Why does everyone in politics dress like a banker? Could it be because that's who owns our politics? I mean, you look at a military dictatorship and everybody in government has fatigues on. I mean, it's exactly what I'm talking about. They want us they need for the conversation to happen on their terms. It's not so much the issues, although the issues are hugely important, and we have fought and fought and fought for issues, conservative issues down the line. It's really for who controls the culture. And just a couple more things before we get too far ahead of ourselves. You want to talk about work?
Yeah, and so when we went into Austin, we started Agenda-wise. I had the 3 years of experience behind my belt, and I kind of knew everyone was here. I knew that these groups were, this size is huge, actually, compared to some of the groups that we were speaking to at the time. I knew that the groups were there, and I knew that we just needed to start telling the truth about what was happening in Austin. So one of the things that we did pretty early on was we started looking at these big groups that had all the money and where they were spending it in the primaries, which is now everybody knows it's the most important place to spend money in Texas politics, because who you get elected in the primary is most likely going to be elected in the general. And so we've seen an uptick in time of challenges to incumbents, which is important. And what we really needed to start doing was going after the money that was backing the incumbents. And so one of the groups that we put in our crosshairs was Texans for Lawsuit Reform. And I don't know if any of you guys have heard of them. They did some great work reforming abuse of the legal system in Texas, but then after a period of time, that had kind of run its course, and they had done their work there, and they were just protecting their gains. So if they've got an incumbent who was for their cause, they're going to back the incumbent, even though the guy that's challenging the incumbent would be good on their cause, and they would be good on Texas Right to Life and Empower Texans and all these other ones. They would still back the incumbent over the challenger, who would be good on all the issues. And so against counsel or against the advice of others, we just popped out and said,
against the culture of the Austin even conservative movement culture, because these guys had made their name doing tort reform, doing some really good things that everybody liked, but had gotten to the table, and suddenly we just want to, we're just here now, and we'll just use that to our advantage. We'll protect our gains, and everybody else is consistent. One of the reasons it's really not smart to be a one-issue voter is that, yeah, they were blocking all these other important conservative issues from coming to the table because they were just protecting themselves. And so we came up and we said all this stuff. We didn't come and say, you guys are terrible. But this was the big heavyweight in the room. TLR was the heavyweight in the conservative movement at the time. And we said, look, these guys aren't helping anymore. They helped on their issue. We really appreciate that. But we just can't give, champion emeritus status to them and have them keep blocking what needs to happen next. And everybody just kind of grabbed their seats and looked at us and tried to get out of our blast radius, because we were challenging something you weren't supposed to challenge, and it turned out pretty well. I mean, really, I forget who it is. A great theologian from hundreds of years ago said, "The truth is like a lion. You let it out, and it does its work on its own." And that's really our best, always our best ally is you don't need to have a lot of friends if you're telling the truth. And agenda-wise, relied on that, and we still rely on that.
Yeah, and in 2009, I remember when our Speaker Strauss was elected, going through the session and just thinking the whole time, and this is before Weston and I were together, but I was sitting there the whole time just taking notes, and we're a team. We work really well together. Apart, we're pretty good individually, but together we're lights out. And so I'm the document, and I document everything.
We do say so ourselves.
Yes. But I document everything and retain knowledge of Austin and stuff that's going on, encyclopedic. And so after the 2009 session, I had I just had a stack of stuff to go with on Strauss. And I just remember looking for somebody that wanted to go do it as well. And then Weston came along and I said, hey, I've got this pile of stuff, what should we do? And so we started talking to Joanne and Michael and lots of others, and we started running races against the speaker, which wasn't possible before 2009, thanks to, goodness, his name is escaping me right now, Shackelford and Signs, at the group that they're constantly changing their name, but I think they were LI at one point. They fought for us to be able to go in there and take part in this race. In 2000 and the following session, 2010, 2011, was the first chance that we got to do it. It was Ken Paxton.
He's talking about the speaker's race. The first vote in any session used to be against the law for us to talk about it. It was a completely closed situation. The most important vote by far in any session. And the group, which was called Free Market Foundation, sued and said that's an unconstitutional law, won. And all of a sudden we were sitting on the ability to run a speaker's race and to tell the people in Tyler and White House and everywhere else, hey, this is really important. You should know about this. And by the way, you should know about the Speaker of the House in Texas. He's really powerful. And the only reason you don't is because because they made it illegal for anybody but legislators and lobbyists to talk about this. And we pushed really hard to get somebody to run and to continue and to keep it up. And it's been an important part of the mix ever since.
And the thing, and this is a side note, it's not in my notes, but it's something that pops to mind, is that when you started doing this stuff, when Ken Paxton popped up and challenged Strauss, he was a guy who was going against the powers. He was going against the establishment, and he was rewarded. He was rewarded by a promotion to the Senate, and he was rewarded by a promotion to Attorney General. And he's still being attacked to this day because he did the right thing. And we see example after example after example of conservatives who are doing the right thing, getting fruit from that action.
Well, and the best evidence that you have to know that he's got integrity and that he's still on our side, some of the best evidence is that he's still being attacked. Because, it's easy for people, the entire time the ruling class, anybody who becomes relevant, they're being either on the one hand recruited, they try to recruit you, and they try to bury you. Either one will do. If you're a threat to them, they want to get rid of you professionally, politically, or they want to recruit you, and they can use that. They're always on the market for a watchdog that's developed a taste for raw meat. When the burglar shows up and you throw a raw steak down and he eats while you take the furniture out of the house. They're always on the market for that kind of thing, and people know that, and that's always something that we have to that we're guarding against. And back to what we were saying about political correctness, I have right here, it relies on maintaining control of the culture. When you have control, you have the power of excommunication. So it was very important for us to try to change the political culture in Austin. And the speaker's race was a big part of that. And one of the things that we noticed as we went along in this Tea Party, I call it the Tea Party awakening. There's kind of a lot of people say the Tea Party is dead. The Tea Party's not dead. The Tea Party was an awakening of something that had been there a long time, and it was people getting hope that they had a chance to be heard, and it was a reinvigoration. It invigorated the conservative movement at the time. But one of the things that we noticed really early on is that there's a difference in the Republican Party. There's double-minded Republicans and there's single-minded Republicans. And we have grown to kind of believe that this is a lot more important than any other distinction that you can put on Republican. We talk about conservative and moderate and freedom, and we have different words. But I always go back to there's a book by Milton Friedman that I read one time. I believe it's called Free to Choose. I think that's the one. And it's towards the end. And Milton Friedman was a famous economist. Free market economist, and he had had a close relationship with every president of his adult life. He knew them, at least the Republicans, but I think it was all of them. And he's all about free market economics. And he said, he was writing this book, I believe in the late 80s, and he said, by far, the president who was the most intelligent and who understood free market economics and who adhered to them the most closely in his personal politics was Richard Nixon. The problem was, that's not what he governed out of. He didn't govern out of his personal politics the way you and I think everyone does. And I read that, and that had already kind of made an impression on me. But we started to see it. We started to see people who could really talk the talk, but always didn't really walk the walk very well. And finally came to realize that there are single-minded people who don't have a campaign persona, and then a legislative persona, or don't have a get attention from the masses persona, and then do a job for the special interest persona. They don't have those two personalities. They just have one. And those people are almost always, like I said, pushed to Jonathan Stickland's a good example of one. He doesn't change. He doesn't really have two voices. He's just single-minded, and they just constantly try to bury him, try to make him insignificant, try to call him a clown and stupid and everything they can think of. They've been doing it to Zedler for years. Anybody who doesn't have those two, anyone who's not double-minded, anyone who's single-minded, and the double-minded people, especially the ones with the best conservative act, are always get a lot of, are always a big deal, because those are the people that can go out and handle the masses, but in the end are on team ruling class. So it became really important for us to draw distinctions between them, and you don't have to do that by saying he's the real deal and he's not. You just bring things up, and you bring up issues and let them kind of sort themselves out.
And so this election cycle in Texas, the primary was, I think, underperforming for a lot of people. And what we were looking at during that time was this culture. It's what is a good candidate to run a primary against this incumbent? And if you look at the people that won, you'll see that they are the most authentic candidates. The candidates who have the look and feel of a banker, they didn't do as well. We've talked about it for a long time. Conservatives have a discount. They get a discount in a primary. They don't have to spend as much money to win an election because they have the truth on their side. But the thing that can counteract that discount is a conservative candidate who knows the truth, who is the Nixon, who, if they legislated or if they ran out of their intentions, then they would win walking away. But they spend a lot of time trying to look like this other person. They spend a lot of time trying to be credible. They spend a lot of time trying to be, tick off all the boxes. What we really need is a lot of people who look and act just like us. We need a lot of people who are just going to go out there and say, hey, here's what it is. And, take me as I am, and I'm going to go up there and I'm going to legislate the way you want me to. Yeah, and they would do a lot better.
The primaries, very well said, that there's that banker, that culture, that ruling class culture that you can just smell on somebody. And it seems like over and over, we don't learn our lesson. We kind of so badly want conservatives, true conservatives, that look and feel like that. And if we could have that, we'd have the best of both worlds. But but really, what you're doing is you're getting somebody who's already obeying the ruling class culture, who's already basically politically correct and therefore not really a threat. When people like Bob Hall run, that guy's authentic. You look at him and he's not trying to learn how to be a politician and sound like a politician. They do very well in primaries because we have grown. We know the difference between someone who is telling the truth and someone who's messing with us. I mean, you can feel it. You can feel that political speak that sometimes gets dignified by ruling class types. Oh, look at all of his discipline, and look at all of he's very polished and all that. I mean, people who are not manipulating you don't have to be so careful about what they say. They can speak because there's not a danger that something might jump out of my mouth and get me in trouble. But there is a danger that people who are running campaigns on this Tyler White House agenda and then governing on this Austin lobby agenda, there is a chance that something from the wrong side of their brain is going to pop out of their mouth. So they have to talk in a really disciplined way, and they have to stay on these lines, and they have to answer just so. And this is a perfect example of controlling the people by controlling the political culture. They've turned that, at least in the political culture, they've turned that discipline, that tightrope act, they've turned that into a virtue. Oh, he's a good politician. Hey, conservatives, this guy, he's really disciplined. And again, they need for it to be that way. They need for people to speak and act that way because they need for them to be able to say one thing and do another without technically lying. And they're very good at that. But it's the reason that the guys that don't do that, we have such a good reaction to them. As long as we're not bothered by a bunch of people from Austin culture telling us, oh, they're dumb, they're stupid, they're going to embarrass us, they're not credible, they don't know the issues, that happens a lot. People try to bury these authentic candidates under, kind of an avalanche of not professional enough and see if they can get rid of them like that. But if they're able to survive that, those become the candidates that we really, really like. And there's good reason for that. We trust them. At a gut level, we trust them.
And they're really, really hard to beat. You don't have to spend a lot of money protecting them. You can, but you don't have to. We have this wave, we have the awakening in 10, 12, and 14. The way that Austin responded to it was by ceding a little bit of ground. They'll give up some of this, they'll give up some things, but they don't want to give it all up. And then they'll come back to us as they're working. I mean, they're working this whole time. They're trying to
What they want to do is get the culture. As long as they'll give you a couple of bills, as long as they say, okay, now tell everyone we did that we're good conservatives. And you know what, can you start to just kind of clean up your tone a little bit? Can you maybe dress a little different? And all the time they're grooming you and grooming you and grooming you and grooming you to be someone that they're not worried about anymore because you're now politically correct. You're not dangerous anymore. You don't say whatever, really matters deep in your gut that you were talking about at dinner with your family the other day. And every time you say some different thing, but trust me, there's definitely a place for certain people to carry certain issues and to be, disciplined and to be carrying that ball. But we also need people, if it's not going to be grassroots type people who are interested in state politics, who's going to bring up all the stuff that really matters to protect our state and to hand our state on in decent shape to our kids and our grandkids? I mean, who else is going to do it? If we all get professionalized, who's going to do it? I mean, who's going to be there to say those things? One of the things that the ruling class culture always put off limits because it's one of the most important issues. It's really one of the core issues to them staying in power was immigration. And that was one that the grassroots talked about anyway because it just didn't care. We're just going to talk about it. Even in Austin, even in the conservative movement, don't talk about immigration. You'll sound crazy. You don't want to talk about that. And it was very important to keep that outside of the culture, make that a hot button topic. When in reality, it's extremely important. People care a ton about it. And the grassroots just kind of was stubborn about it and talked about it anyway. And now we have a presidential candidate who who kind of took it and said, he dragged it into the mainstream. And now they have to talk about it. You're not crazy if you talk about immigration anymore in Austin as a conservative, but you might have been called that 5-6 years ago.
Not even that long ago.
Long ago.
Yeah, if you look at legislation that was written on the topic of immigration, there's not that much. Go back and look at 13, 11, and 15, and you're not going to find mountains and mountains and mountains of immigration legislation, even though it's the number one polling issue in the state, and it has been for years.
But that was obscured for the longest time. There was a talking point, circulated Austin, consultant types would be in a conservative room, and people start talking about immigration. You say, "Oh, no one cares about that." And if someone had enough facts to say, actually they do, it polls really highly on people's issues that people care about. Then they would say, "Yeah, but we did this other poll that tests the strength of how much they care." Okay, so a lot of people care about it, but with how much strength do they care about it? And on that poll, it polls like 7th. That's what we were told. It polls like, which, I mean, come on. You know, like, it smelled like it smelled like what from the beginning. But, you know, finally, you know, and one of the things I really like about Donald Trump is that he just took that issue and just brought it right out into the open and right into the mainstream. And now that was something that was protected against for a very long time. And there's no doubt they'll try to push it back out of the conversation because it's important for the Democrats to get votes and it's important for the Republicans to have cheap labor. And so that trumps everything, all the other havoc that's created by our crazy, you know, immigration and border situation.
So one of the things that is really encouraging about what y'all are going to do with the other Tea Party groups across the state is champion many issues, because that's another one of the things that we've seen happening recently, which is the establishment coming in and trying to say, hey, everybody, let's just focus on one thing. Nah, we got to have 10 or 11 different things going because it's a little crazy out there. I don't know if you guys noticed. We can't hunker down in a foxhole. We got to get going on lots of different things. Last session, at the very end, I know that Texas Values, which is a group run by Jonathan Science, it's a fantastic organization. They were standing on the top of the roofs telling us we need to do something because gay marriage is coming down the pipe in June, in the summer. We got to get it done now. And you know what? We didn't get it done. And where are we now? Well, we're in a lot of trouble. We're behind the 8 ball because we didn't move aggressively during the session. So lots of issues. Get on board with lots of things. Get on board with your favorite thing, but join the coalition and have the coalition champion many different.
And don't be afraid to talk about what matters to you. Think of it this way: the single-minded politicians, the single-minded Republicans and conservatives, who only have one setting and have freedom with their speech because they're not guarding from saying the wrong thing all the time. You can't put out enough issues for them. They'll sign on to all of them because they can. They're not working for somebody else. The problem with the guys that dress like bankers and speak so is that they don't really own themselves. Richard Nixon did not own himself. We thought he was a decision maker, but he was kind of bought and paid for, like most of our politicians are. When there's someone who owns his own voice, when there's a politician who owns his own voice, he can speak his mind all the time, and he can distinguish himself from the pack by, you know, you say, I'm against gender-free bathrooms, and you say we need to secure the border, and you say we need to lower taxes, and you say he can stand up and be all for all of that stuff. And the guy who's on a program and who's trying to stay on message all the time, who's disciplined and is working for the establishment, he can't really say that without permission. He can't go and talk about. So it's really like a shot in the arm for the good guys when you talk about a bunch of issues, because they can follow you on all of them. And it's really a problem for the wrong kind of guys because they can't follow so easily, and you start to get to see who's who. You know, because when the conversation is simple and controlled and only has a couple of variables, the political conversation, even the conservative conversation, it's very easy for the fakers to hide. You make it very easy for the fakes to hide when you don't talk about these hot button issues, and you make it very easy for them. And as we know, as conservatives know, the Republican Party is well known for the double game. That's what it. You know, there's the lobby agenda and there's their campaign agenda, and they keep telling us they're conservative and they keep not doing conservative things. And so by now we know they don't really own themselves. They're just using a coalition. They have figured out what coalition they need to beat liberals. Because, you know, look, giving away, you know, money that's popular. It turns out that's popular. There's a lot of people that'll just take free money all the time, and there's a lot of people that'll embrace, hey, legal drugs and legal prostitution, whatever, everything. You know, throw caution to the wind and let's throw Christianity out, all of that stuff. There's a lot of people out there, and so the left has a nice base, and the Republican Party is kind of this has been for a long time this special interest agenda that has hunted issues and stacked up enough of them to where it has a base that can contend with the other base, but we never get our stuff done. We never get the stuff that matters to us done, and we're told that we have to care about, no, you need to care about this issue that Kind of sounds like gobbledygook to us. I care about immigration. I care about prayer in schools. I care about abortion. That's what I think has to do with the soul of our country. Don't let someone tell you that you're not right. You are right. I know that they're getting they're looking for questions. We're about to go to questions. Do you have anything you want to?
So yeah, real quickly, while he was talking, I was thinking about just how important this group and groups like it are. Do you notice in all that we're talking about a lot of things that we've spent a lot of time thinking about and dissecting and organizing and diagramming and so that we can attack it. Because you guys are here, they're having to up their game, and it is way up. They are working at it's top-notch level. They're spending a lot of money on it. Money that we'll never see or know about. They're spending on it because you complicate things for them.
And I'll say it even more bare than that. And I especially want to say it because I know there's this sense that somehow everything's just gone wrong. You're winning. They're having to change their entire game because of what you've done. I know it might not feel that way to you. There's a lot of reasons why it doesn't feel that way to you. But erase the name Trump if you don't like him. Erase all that stuff that might be in your way. Think about it. This is somebody who's going after immigration. He's going after political correctness, really. What's he running against? He's running against our trade deals that privilege international banks and transnational corporations and sell out the American worker. Immigration, and he's running against political correctness. That's the third. If you think about it, and political correctness is the way. If we all agree to be politically correct, we can't win. And so he's trying to move the bounds of what's possible in the discussion in the public square. These are sacred cows. So forget the name of the person. Let's imagine it was if in fact he is someone you don't like. Imagine it's somebody else. These are important things to dislodging the group that has played us forever. So, and it was something, and you think about it, the last two people who in this election who were left, it was Cruz and Trump, the two most anti-establishment people, the two people running the most conservative campaign. So don't lose heart. I mean, really, the establishment GOP right now in Austin and DC is flummoxed. They don't know which end is up. They don't believe anybody that says they know what's happening right now. Nobody does. This is uncharted waters. This is the time. This is the best time for you guys to assert, what do you think is important? What do you think is important? Because you have room right now, and it's room that you've earned. All these meetings you went to, all of these emails you forwarded on, all of these conversations you've had, that's why we have this situation. That's why we have the establishment in disarray, trying everything they can to get somebody beaten. They can't do it. It's not working. This is good news for, maybe it's a enemy of our enemy is our friend situation, but none of us have ever seen the establishment attack anybody more than they're attacking the Republican nominee right now. And the fact that anti-establishment politics had that much power in it is directly related to what you guys have done, and there's a lot of fuel left in that tank. In fact, I think it's coming on stronger and stronger. So you guys be of good heart. You guys have done incredible work, and it is working. Don't lose heart. Okay, we've gone too long.
We're good. We're right on it.
All right, we've got great questions.
The first question is, some nationally level, well-known conservative commentaries say nationwide immigration is not number one or even number three. Economy, jobs are number one and number two. Your thoughts?
Trump sailed in, said immigration, stayed on it, and crushed everybody.
Do we trust?
You really trust
the polling? Yeah. Do you trust the polling? It's who controls who's asking the questions and how the questions are being asked. If I can ask you a question the way and get the answer that I want,
I'll forward Joanne a video of what's his name, that goofball who does focus groups and what's his name, Rove's little gremlin. What's his name? Frank Luntz. Frank Luntz in an off year in an off year with Penn and Teller in Las Vegas, telling them, I can get anyone to say anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's on YouTube. You can see him saying that. And yet he's the guy who comes in at election time and he puts a suit on and he gets on Fox News and he starts to tell us, oh, here's the new science. And it's all kind of wrapped in science and professional. And all he's doing is herding us like sheep into this political culture that we're supposed to not think that immigration matters. Does anybody believe that immigration doesn't go right down to the core of the soul of anybody who cares about the future of this country? Does anybody think that's a credible concept? I've never met anybody who did not understand that immigration needs to be, it goes to the core of who we are. We're not going to have our country if we don't get it under control. And yet consultants are always telling us, oh, those in the know that it's not that important. It feels important, but actually all the science tells us it's not. Hogwash. We have a guy who just beat the entire apparatus because of which issue? He saddled up immigration against the advice of every political professional. He saddled up and he rode that horse to victory over the whole system. So that's how, in my opinion, that's how important immigration is. Economy and jobs is huge, always. So that doesn't need to be defended.
Daniel, did you want to add something? Okay.
Thank you.
Why is it so hard for devoted political activists to make their message real to the citizens, as you were saying, real on a personal level, and then it's a poverty of the soul is as personal as starvation? So the question is, why is it so hard for devoted
Why is it tough to get traction
political
with people?
advocates to make
I would
their
say this, and Joanne can come correct me afterwards if I'm saying the wrong thing. I would say, if you don't feel it, don't say it. If you don't feel y'all toggle till you get to an issue that gets you fired up, because there's a reason. There is a still small voice inside all of us that's directing us towards the truth all the time, that I know each of you have learned to listen to, that I know each of you know when you're straying off of it, it's going, nah, nah, nah. Or when you're going onto it, it's saying, yep, yep, yep. Talk about stuff that voice celebrates. If you talk about stuff that voice celebrates, instead of the stuff that consultants have focus grouped you to need to go talk about, then you will have energy again, and you will convince people. I mean, I'm up here, and as you can tell, I've now worked myself up. You know, I'm feeling it because this matters, and you are feeling it. A bunch of you are feeling it because you know it matters. You get professionalized to the point of a straitjacket, and all of a sudden I can't talk about what matters to me anymore because I'm supposed to be trying to be professional. And it's no fun anymore, and people stop showing up. I mean, that's the way that they either kill or recruit. It's what they do. They take the grassroots who discover they have a voice, and they try to kill them all and recruit them all, and either way is fine with them. And if you can make the really good ones into little sentries of the political correctness code, enforcers of it, you make whoever's left very controllable, and that's just fine. There's something from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis that always kind of warmed my heart every time I heard it. And it was something along the lines of Aslan was not a tame lion. Don't be a tame Tea Party. Don't be tame grassroots people. Because when you're tame, you've probably been tamed. And when you're wild, you're dangerous. You know, so don't get on anyone's ship. Don't get on anyone's team. You're on your own team. That whole thing that comes from Austin is totally unreliable. That whole thing that comes from D.C., we know nothing if we don't know that that's totally unreliable. We can't count on it to be true, and the second that we count on it to be true, it starts to become false because there's always special interest bearing down on it. Y'all, what's in here, what you know matters, that's how you can protect the next generations and listen to it.
I always love that quote from and it reminds me, you know, there's a quote for women that says, you want to be the kind of woman that when your feet hit the floor in the morning out of bed, Satan says, oh crud, or whatever he says, she's up. And I was thinking, you know, the same thing for us.
Absolutely.
You want to be the kind of Tea Party member, grassroots member that when your feet hit the floor, Austin says, crud, they've started their day.
Well, and so true. It's so true. It's one of the things that I've always admired about your leader over
Definitely.
here, is that she's, you know, one of the things we put in here is if you want to have a voice and keep it, don't ever get yourself involved in anything politically that you can't walk away from. If you have one thing you can't walk away from in politics, man, in principle, you already lost. Just get out. Do something else, because what's going to happen is you're going to be part of the problem. You're going to be that watchdog who gets thrown, a raw steak while the robbers are cleaning out the house. And that's almost worse than not having a watchdog, is it not? Wouldn't it be better if you got robbed and there was no watchdog? You would at least know what the problem was. You have you got a dead watchdog, that's a problem. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. How can it be against the law to set up a road to run against the speaker, or was it just a figure of speech for emphasis against the current speaker? Was it just a
the way the law read is you can't spend more than $100 or the equivalent in kind. What was it? Publicizing
to influence the election.
To influence the speaker vote. So essentially, what does that even mean? How do I know when I've said $100 worth of words? Like, how would anyone ever even know that? It's kind of just a ninja way to say you can't talk about it.
But is that a state law?
It was a state law. It was overturned when Free Market Foundation challenged it. Jonathan Saenz, who's now kicking tail with Texas Values and getting Houston bathroom laws overturned. He was a lawyer for Free Market Foundation. He was on that case, Kelly Shackelford's organization. And they challenged that law, and all of a sudden in 2010, for the first time, we were allowed to be a part of the speaker's race. And that's when Ken Paxton was recruited. And if you look at it, raise your hand if you can think of a single Strauss loyalist, not someone who's voted for Strauss. Strauss has his loyalists, then there's the conservative caucus, they're about the same size, and then you have the movable middle. They'll go with whoever they think is going to win, and you can maybe convince them, you can maybe kind of radicalize them one way or the other if you work really hard at it. Strauss loyalist has ever been promoted? Hands. 0. You hit your ceiling politically when you back Strauss with a full throat. By contrast, if you run for speaker against Strauss, what happens? Well, we have an AG. I mean, he's attacked. He's attacked because he's still real, so we like that. But he got a promotion to the Senate. I don't know that we've done a good job of challenging him yet, even. But just challenging him, he got promoted to the state Senate. Then he got promoted to the Secretary of State. When our conservatives run for the Senate, they win. When they run for the House and they're authentic, they win. Then they get promoted as many times as they're willing to run. Who thinks that? I mean, I'll just be, because I'm gonna follow my own advice and not be too careful here. Who thinks that Dan Patrick wouldn't win if he ran for a state, another statewide office, another big one? People like him. He would probably. I know that there's been some. There's always, but anyway. I mean, people.
I had a note in here of something that we do need to talk about, and it is in line with challenges. So, did people here go to the convention, the state convention this year? Yeah, yes. We were talking about Meckler earlier. Are you familiar with what they were doing with the party platform? Hands, shake. Okay, so what they really wanted to do was cut it down to 2 pages.
What they really wanted to do is put it on a fortune cookie.
Well, they'd love to put it on a fortune cookie.
Again, there's nothing for them to navigate.
So, and I think the only reason why we don't have one and have that fortune cookie platform is because there was a challenge. If they had not been challenged, they would have just had carte blanche to do whatever they want. Challenges are the most important thing. If you don't have a challenge, you don't have anything because you don't have anything to leverage.
They leverage you even when you're out of power. And if you don't challenge, you don't have leverage. There's no accountability for them. He sat in on a bunch of these preliminary meetings at the convention, and there would be these establishment voices that would pop out and say, "Hey, can we do this or that to the platform?" And they'd get shouted down, and then they'd go away again. They'd kind of go, slink back into the shadows, having done their trial balloon, gotten their hands slapped, and then they slunk back. But the reason they slunk back is that there was like kind of a Team Meckler and a Team Woodfill, and Team Meckler didn't want to get saddled with all this baggage of they're trying to manipulate the platform. So they tried it. When it didn't work easily, they pulled back. Why were they so careful with those efforts? Because there was a challenge, and that's always the case. Whenever we challenge, even when we lose, we gain leverage. We raise the spotlight is much brighter when we challenge people.
All right, let's slide a couple more in here before we end the day. Address the consultant culture and its impact on conservative candidates.
I personally don't like it. I mean, I've kind of been running it down this whole time. I think consultants, and there's different kinds of consultants, but for the most part,
they have a playbook, and it's the establishment playbook, and that's what they've been handed and told. Here's how you win. It's just not. It's the wrong playbook.
There's been issue after issue where there's been, the consultant always comes out when it's conservatives who want to do something. There's always a consultant that pops out to be the smartest guy in the room and say, "Hey, here's how we should do it. We should." Instead of going after the conservatives, we should go after the Democrats. That would be an end around, and wouldn't that be nifty? Well, what happens is when you package something conservative for liberals, conservatives run from it. You don't have a base of fire anymore. And so I tend to think that most of them are the people that protect this political correct culture. This idea that, hey, let's all act like bankers. They use words like credible and reasonable and disciplined, and all of that is a way to get you to be a kind of a good little boy and not say any of the things that could get them in trouble, because they're very vulnerable. Anybody running on this platform and governing on that one, I mean, they are sitting ducks all the time. All you have to do is say it. Why did you say this and do that? And they're in trouble, so they have to have a really oppressive culture that keeps you feeling like, oh, I'm being judged all the time on how professional I am, and gets you feeling like you're dumb if you speak your mind. You're not dumb if you speak your mind. You're smart if you speak your mind, because that's what's been given to you, and nobody's paying you to do this. I mean, I'm again, Joanne, I'm not hope I'm not stepping on any toes over here, but it's just, I'm excited about people like you who will show up on a Friday. I mean, that's amazing to me. The number of people that each of you represent in terms of, I know that people come and talk to you about politics. I don't have to know anything about you except that you're here. And I know that your family says, well, have you heard of this person? Because it happens to me too. And you end up being an opinion maker. And those people who are asking you are probably opinion makers down the line at work, something. And there's a lot of people and a lot of credibility here, because you guys don't do things because you're getting paid by somebody to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. You guys are reliable. Your word carries.
Okay. How should we begin to address climate change? Who is speaking against climate change?
Who is speaking against climate change? Yeah. I don't know who's speaking against climate change. I don't feel convinced that they haven't convinced me that it's a thing. I mean, they've convinced me that it's important for them to convince us it's a thing. And, I've seen carbon taxes and different schemes to get rich, for politicians to get rich on it. But I've seen, the evidence is conflicting. I mean, and they can get as many hot rod academics. I mean, think about this system where, they talk about, they have academics who are very ambitious, and that was another thing in there that I didn't have time to talk about. The protective streak in us and the ambitious streak in us, and how the ruling class tries to move us as conservative activists from the protective to the ambitious. And it's a subtle change, but it means everything. But these ambitious academics who want names, who have to apply for government grants, that's how they move ahead. I mean, there's no integrity in that system. Those are the guys that are lining up with politicians. Al Gore's going to get rich on carbon taxes. He's got a train of scientists who have done nothing since they got their job at their university but apply for government grants, and they have no chance of moving ahead if they don't get them. And I'm sorry, but there's a credibility problem there. And they uncovered emails at one of the top places in England that said, man, the temperatures aren't going the way we thought. We know they're supposed to. I don't know why. So it's just I'm not somebody who gets swayed by just the crowd saying, hey, go this way. I've got to actually be convinced, and I'm not convinced.
All right, before we wrap up with our last questions, just remember before you leave, take your paperwork, take your reminders with you so that we can see you back here in 2 weeks. And is there a way, just real quick, do y'all work together? Do you have separate things. How do people support you and get in touch with you? And then we'll ask the last one.
It's lonely being single-minded
Aw.
in
Aw.
Austin, and no, I mean that's why we have each other. But we have a blog that's called pillarpost.net. That's a subscription blog. It's part of how we support ourselves. That if you sign up, go to pillarpost.net, sign up, get a month for free, $8 a month, new content every day, and it's a way to support us, and it's also a way, hopefully, to hear, the way that maybe we said a thing or two that turned a light on or two and was interesting and illuminating. That's what we try to put on our blog every day.
And on the
Pillarpost, pillarpost.net. Sign up, and I hope you like it.
yeah, and on climate change.
Tell your friends about it.
As a defining issue and drawing distinctions, which is something we really didn't talk about, but something that conservatives need to do, which is, okay, here's the issue, take a side. The last two Republican nominees for president were believers in climate change. So, not a good
Okay,
idea.
our last question, and then I think, Rick, you're going to wrap it up. Address the religious liberty issue and the pushback from TAB and the Austin cartel as they oppose any effort to protect free speech and privacy, like the transgender issue. So I left you on a good one.
TAB, that was another one. We talked about TLR pushing them around, we didn't push them around. They have all the power in the world, and we don't. But we told the truth about them, and the truth pushed them around a little bit a few years ago. Same with TAB. TAB was coming to certain meetings the conservatives were having and asking questions that were very and we started looking into them, and they had been pretty much pushed out of the inner circle of the Austin conservative, and now they've gone totally progressive.
And that stands for TA.
Texas Association of Businesses. They've gone totally progressive socially, and they've just decided to put their chips over there, and it just shows where these people stand. I mean, there's a cabal in the middle of Republicans and Democrats who vote for each other's stuff and use the rest of us to get elected, and they've just gone to a different quadrant, a different sector of that group, and they're pushing progressive politics to see if they can. Michael Sullivan always calls TAB rent seekers. They're seeing if they can get some, they can get find a rental situation on that side of things.